All right, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to splice that video together in this video, so if I don't, well, y'all are gonna miss out on a lot of key shit. But here's your potassium salts for the third time. Just getting ready to crack over. Wear your eye gear, yada, yada, yada. Take that heat down a little bit because that stuff can get a little bit violent and it can pop. It can pop pretty far too, and you don't want to get a drop of that shit popped in your eye. It can do permanent eye damage, so that's why I'm kind of standing way back here and using a long spoon, which is not sufficient safety, and I don't recommend it. But I'm a fucking idiot, and this is my channel, and you're not my dad, so I can do whatever I want. You don't have to forgive me. I'm really upset with this iPhone that I'm using as my recorder. It likes to fuck with me. Pardon my French, but like I said, if you don't like it, you don't have to watch. This is my channel. It's my chocolate factory. This is like the third time I've tried recording this, and every time this phone has stopped my damn video right in the middle of the recording. So, let's try this one more time. Wood ash from burning wood in the fireplace. You save your ashes, you put them into a bucket. Submerge them in about half a bucket of water. Stir it good. Let it sit. Stir it good, let it sit. You'll see the ash will separate and you'll have a yellow water. But you want to get you another bucket. Get you something like this, maybe a cheesecloth put in here, and begin to filter off the ash to where you have nothing but a nice yellow water. That yellow water is going to be loaded with potassium salts, namely potassium sulfate, potassium carbonate, potassium hydroxide. Now when you got it filtered off good enough to where it's just a nice yellow pea looking water, it'll look like piss pretty much, you want to put it into a range top safe dish like this, Corningware, and get your long spoon. And you're going to begin to boil that water off. I've saved you the pain of having to watch me boil all the water off and screw this video up 3 times, so we're all the way almost at the crack over part where it begins to become solid. You can already see lots of potassium salts falling out the bottom here. Now, when it becomes solid, you can separate the 3 potassiums at your leisure. Potassium sulfate will drop out of a saturated solution overnight, leaving you with a saturated solution of potassium hydroxide and potassium carbonate, and you can then neutralize the carbonate with chalk. Basically, sodium bicarbonate will neutralize the carbonate and leave you with the potassium hydroxide, which can be used in making homemade soaps and detergents, whatnot. Seriously caustic though, you don't want to get this shit in your eyes or on your skin. It'll burn the crap out of you, so just pretend you see me wearing the gloves and pretend that I'm wearing glasses. Turn that shit back up. I want to hurry up, it's getting late. I want to upload this damn video. This is just like a fun hobby thing I like to do every winter when we're burning the fireplace a lot. It gives me something to do throughout the winter, and the outcome is some really pretty crystals, little kryptonite looking mini faceted crystals that drop out in the bottom of the saturated solution, the sulfate. They look really neat. I think this year I'm going to try and make me one big solid crystal by using a seed crystal and growing a really big one. You can use the potassiums for other things too. The potassium salts can be used for curing meat, making jerky, whatnot in the sun. If you don't have a dehydrator, you can always rub it down with certain potassium salts, and put it out in the sun, and it will cure it, turn it into a cured jerky. There's certain potassiums that are good for wounds. Potassium permanganate is good for that. Like if you get your legs sawed off in the Civil War, you can smother it with potassium permanganate. It might keep the infection from setting in. It's not always guaranteed. You never can just beat some good old 99% isopropyl alcohol when it comes to killing germs. That shit kills 99.999% of everything. And then it evaporates and leaves no residue behind, no residual traces of itself. Fully evaporates. I like to use it to burn and make heat in my house. Little alcohol stoves, little isopropyl alcohol stoves I make out of cans. They put off a substantial amount of heat. It heats up the whole room. I can boil a couple gallons of water within 10 minutes if I have the right pot for it. And you can see those potassium salts starting to pile up in the bottom there. See that? Look at that good stuff there. Potassium salts. But that's where it gets the name potash or potassium, because they would save all their potashes and extract the potassium out of them. Thus the name potassium, potassium. 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 That's a funny word. Anyways, it's K on the elemental chart. K is the symbol on the periodic table. So things like potassium iodide, you would abbreviate it as Ki, because that's two elements combined to make a compound. Potassium iodide is another one that's good for a lot of things, for better health, good dietary supplement. It's good for making potable water. It's also a good source of the iodine that's required to make your thyroid work properly. There's radioactive iodine in the air, and the non-radioactive iodine, namely potassium iodide, would be a good example. Makes your thyroid filter out all the bad iodine, the radioactive iodine, thus promoting good thyroid and better health. Now, iodine itself puts off radioactive isotopes. That just means that it emits radio waves. That doesn't mean anything. It's not, I mean, it's poisonous if you try to eat the shit, but it's not cancerous. It doesn't make your hair fall out or any crap like that. Galen Winsor was the head of the nuclear programs of America back in the, I guess, 60s, 70s, and he began to go around and show people the heart of the matter of radioactive materials, namely uranium, plutonium-229, the reactor pools that at the nuclear reactor plants, they had the cooling pools. He would go swimming in those pools. He would take uranium, big old chunk of uranium, throw it in his mouth and drink it down with a glass of water. Then he would take a Geiger meter and run it over his stomach, and you could hear the Geiger meter start putting off that his stomach's putting off the radio waves. That just means that it's emitting radio waves. That doesn't mean that it has a fallout of 500,000 years and you can't go anywhere near it where it's been. That's bullshit. They claim to have dropped 2 bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and there was people never stopped living there. They're still there. So I don't know how they say that it contaminates or makes places radioactive for long periods of time when the people that live in the only places that they ever say they ever dropped the bombs are still there, never left. So I personally don't believe in nuclear weapons. I personally don't believe in that you can take a bumbling idiot, borderline retarded person's mathematics and use it to head up such an important project. That's how you know that they didn't do shit, because they used Einstein's mathematics. That means they did nothing except sell you a bucket ticket. That's it. But I've gone off on a long enough tangent. Anyways, radioactivity doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean that it's bad for you. It just means that it emits radio waves. So simple elements like iodine emit radio waves. But actually not radio waves. It emits radioactive isotopes, to be precise. It's getting there. I don't want to turn the heat up too much because it'll start popping. Once it gets down real concentrated like this, when it's real thick, it pops pretty good. And I mean, one drop of this stuff pop you in the eye, it's going to ruin your whole damn night. So hurry up and dry. Hurry up and dry. I can hear my asthmatic sister in there coughing up a lung. Oh, shit. That's getting nice and thick. Almost there. It begins to take on like a cat piss, musty, mildewy kind of smell when it gets down really concentrated. You can also still kind of smell the burned wood, ash smell a little bit to it. It's never a bad idea to take it in once it's solid and break it back down with water and run it through some filters and burn it back down again to make it a more pure, more of a reagent grade rather than a lab grade. Especially if you plan on making saturated solution and getting you some sulfate crystals to drop out in the bottom. You'll definitely want to make this stuff as clean as possible. Make sure you filter off your saturated solution before you set it in the dark, get any of the crystals that started to drop out when you when it became as saturated as it can be. You get crystals starting to drop out in the bottom. You want to get those out of there, because that'll hinder your crystals from dropping out in solid form. They'll just start dropping out in little tiny crystals, and the next morning you'll have a flask full of a bunch of little tiny crystals in the bottom, like little grains of Epsom salt. But if you filter your saturated solution real good and make it nice and clean, no crystals in it at all, when you set it up to sit overnight, the crystals that drop out in the bottom will be nice good size, like nickel size crystals with little faucets going in all kinds of different directions. Really neat, actually. But you can use those as seed crystals to grow the even bigger ones. Basically, you take one of those little crystals and you tie a string to it and you drop it into another submerged, another saturated solution, and the crystal begins to grow. Now, it'll only grow so much, but you can keep adding new saturated solutions. You can take the crystal out of the old saturated solution and submerge it into a new one, and it will continue to grow and grow and grow until you get it as big as you want it. I've seen some guys grow crystals on YouTube that the size of their hand, big old crystals of aluminum. What was it? Aluminum dodecahydrate. It grows real pretty crystals, big old solid diamond-looking crystals. These crystals here of the potassium sulfate, they more look like kryptonite, or like those crystal palaces in Superman. How they got the individual crystals growing out of like one large clump of crystals, and they'll be going in different directions, and they'll all have like different facets and diameters on them. Pretty impressive. Look like, kind of look like the Superman cave when he throws his little white crystal off into the snow and out pops the big old crystal palace. That's what it looks like. All right, you see it's starting to solidize up now. Seriously smells like cat piss now. Damn, I think everybody in this house has tuberculosis. Except me. Lungs of an athlete. They call me Aqualung. Alright. It's getting to be solid. See how thick that is? You can see the crystals floating on the top too. Kind of looks like glass. Hurry up and dry. Hurry up and dry. There it goes. Now, it's the potassium hydroxide that gives it that yellowish, orangish brown color. When you get the sulfate to drop out, those crystals are pretty clear, white to clear. Hardly any yellowish tint to it at all. It's the sodium hydroxide that gives it that nasty color. I think that's what gives it that piss smell too. Now, I know that potassium hydroxide is strong enough for you to add a little bit of aluminum and hot water to it, and it will literally eat chicken all the way off the bone. So it has potential to do some damage, so treat it very cautiously. It's not quite as caustic as sodium hydroxide, but it can still do it. It can still do some damage, especially to your eyes. I cannot stress that enough. This one had a whole lot in it because I think about 3 fireplaces full. I mean, I burned firewood all night and filled the fireplace full of ashes like 2 or 3 times and put them in that bucket. The bucket was about probably as much as halfway full of ash, and then I put the water just a little bit over the top of that level, and then as I was filtering, I added a little bit more water to it a couple times to rinse any ashes stuck in the bottom of the bucket. You don't want to miss out on any potential potassium salts. The more the merrier. So that's why this little load came out quite a bit. If you was to only do like one fireplace full of ash, you wouldn't get near as much. You'd probably only get about maybe a fourth of this here. But it's a lot more of a viable source than banana peels. I tried the banana peels. I saved banana peels for like an entire month. Used about 30 or 40 of them, and I didn't get shit for a return. My yield was really just crap, and it was really dirty, and it just was not worth the time or effort to even suggest it as a viable source of potassium salts. Now, maybe if you got a hold of the actual banana trees, banana plants, the big families and shit, and dried them up and burned them and took those ashes, maybe that would have more potassium. But banana peels themselves ain't shit for potassium. One thing's for sure, potassium is a very viable element that you need. When you dehydrate, your body spends its electrolytes and its saline and whatnot, and you can drink water and replenish it and stop your dehydration, but you cannot replenish the potassium that your body gets spent when it dehydrates. So every time you dehydrate, even if you do rehydrate yourself, you're not replacing the potassium that was spent during your dehydration. So it's always very important that you take a potassium source if you've been dehydrated in the least, because you need to replace your potassium. Potassium is one of the big leading causes of people's demise in this country, for obvious reasons. I'm not going to go into it because I'll get bamboozled by the thought police. Lack of potassium can cause anything from mock heart attacks to real heart attacks. The lack of potassium can cause all kinds of things. Just about everything that could ever go wrong with your damn body functionally can be the result of a potassium deficiency. Now, these are not exactly the potassiums that I would use to replenish as a dietary supplement. Potassium iodide is, though. Potassium iodide is very good as a dietary supplement. bit more. And as you can see, that's pretty much almost murder she wrote. Almost all crystallized, but more or less you get the gist. It comes out nice shiny crystals. Looks kind of like beach sand. Beach sand that smells like cat piss. And what I do is I collect enough of this stuff here, like this, until I got a nice good bag full of it, or a jar full of it, and I make saturated solution and get the sulfate crystals to drop out. Guess you would call it a hobby of mine. Whatever. Something to do. I'm the kind of person, if I don't have something to do, if I don't occupy myself, I get into fucking trouble. Alright, this video is already almost at half an hour. You see those dry spots there? That's the good, that's the way it looks, nice and crystally. And it's kind of chalky now, but it gets more crystally the more you purify it. It's still got a little bit of ash in it, no matter how pretty it's looking right now, it's got an ash content, and the more you filter it and clean it up, the prettier and more crystally it looks, as opposed to looking chalky or ashy. It will appear to be more like borosilicate or quartz. All right. I don't care if you like the video or not. If you've already watched it, I got mine. But subscribe if you like it. If it does anything for you, food for thought. Peace.